Here we go, party people. This is Where My Killer Tape back. Season 2, episode 18. Word is born. Thank y'all for loving our Father's Day special. We appreciate it. In this episode, we're going to talk about dragging culture and canceling culture. Also going to talk about immigration. We definitely got to talk about that. I'll talk a little bit about Luke Cage, and I do have a little book to review. So definitely, ladies and gentlemen, let's keep this moving. Let's do it.
I like the rhymes.
All of us are born with the miraculous ability to determine the direction from which sounds approach us.
Let us venture into new and uncharted land.
People get shook up, when I'm introduced as God.
You got that good hair, too. You're the first one out there with a dashiki talking that crap.
It's like a jungle sometimes, it makes me wonder how I keep from going under. It's like a jungle sometimes, it makes me wonder how I keep from going under.
I pull up, hop out, air out, made it look sexy. They won't take me out my element. Nah, take me out my element.
Usually, man, I don't pick up books like on a whim. Somebody either recommends it or I stumble upon a review of it, or it's about somebody that I'm particularly interested in, or, being a historian, if it's something that deals with history, particularly African-American studies, I usually, pick it up. But anyway, I was in the library and I saw this book by William Noguera. It's called Escape Artist, Memoir of a Visionary Artist on Death Row. So his work is freaking incredible. And but he's on death row in San Quentin in California. And it's the story of his life. And it's very interesting. Again, I didn't think it was going to be awesome like that, because it's a really thick book, but it's really good. And I like the way he wrote it because he deals with 3 periods of his life, growing up in California and living in a very abusive household. At the same time, he also talks about his time when he got arrested for murder, and he was staying in a jail, and then his time in San Quentin. So I think he splits it up into that. And I think it's real interesting because, it jumps back and forth. But what he's doing is he's trying to demonstrate to you how his life and his trajectory led him to where he's at now. Highly recommend it. There are moments where it's very, very, very violent, even when because he was also violent as a kid. Because, of course, he lived in an abusive household. So he talks about that very graphically. He talks about fighting while he was in prison. He talks about meeting different people in there. So it does get like a little bit violent. So it might be triggering for some people. But other than that, I enjoyed the book. He's not a gangbanger. So I think it's very interesting how he navigated the prison industrial complex without being a part of any crew or gang, and how he was able to survive. Like that story in of itself is just amazing. But I like when you read it, like now you understand why he calls it Escape Artist, because what he ends up doing is he ends up channeling all that energy into his artwork. And that's how he escapes. Like he goes into that zone, and that's how he escapes the prison bars. And I think that's real interesting. Plus, this is a good way of how you examine the prison industrial complex and how it works and how it creates monsters out of people. So really dope book, once again, by William Noguera, Escape Artist, Memoir of a Visionary Artist on Death Row. And for those of you that are wondering, I did start watching Luke Cage season 2. Probably will give a full review in episode 19. But so far, it's actually dope. I really like how Chio Coker, who is the showrunner and executive producer, really kind of like threw in, like the reggae, like the Jamaican scene. You know what I mean? Like all the Jamaican massive. So it's really dope. It reminds me of, when I grew up in New York. Because growing up in New York City, you was around West Indians. You was around, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, people of the African diaspora, a full spectrum. And I'm glad that he did that in this episode. I will say this, you do have to watch Defenders and Luke Cage season 1 to really know what's actually kind of like going on, because they bring back a lot of characters from there. And I think that's important. So I'm not going to give you any spoilers in this, like kind of like a mini review. So yeah, it's like a mini review, right? I'm on episode 9. I just finished episode 9. It's really dope so far. I like it. And yes, they have capoeira in it. the main villain, Bushmaster. His capoeira is just amazing. It's very simple, and they shoot it very simple, in a simple manner, and it's very effective, and it's really dope. I love it. My students are loving it, so definitely check it out. It's really, really dope. Misty Knight, they really develop her character, and it's funny because I fell in love. You know, when I found out who was doing her character, I wasn't familiar with her, so I didn't actually like her, but then when I saw season 1, I was like, man, she's fucking dope. Like, just her acting and really, it's just dope. So they picked the right person for that. Shout out to Chio Coco for that. So it's just all the, one thing I love about the Netflix shows is the supporting cast. Supporting cast is really, really dope. And I think that's really what makes a lot of the Marvel comics dope, is they have a really dope supporting cast. So, Misty Knight, Mariah, Black Mariah, it's just everybody that's in there is really holding it down. So I highly recommend it, and check it out. Where I rated in the Netflix shows, I'm not done with it yet. And what I'll probably do in my next episode is rate all the Netflix shows from Marvel. Peace.
It's all a game. It's all a game.
This episode, I wanted to talk about dragging and canceling. But we're going to talk about dragging first. And dragging is a form of usually when somebody gets humiliated online. And I know initially it started off as it started off as a form of bullying. That's where it actually came from, where someone will talk about somebody online, usually somebody they know from school or whatever. And it's just something that actually took a more political approach. And usually celebrities and politicians and public figures usually are the ones that get dragged on Twitter, or just people of note, right? Because you can be certified and not really be anybody of note and still get dragged. And you get humiliated. And usually it's for something they say or some sort of policy or an act that's really bad, like, somebody gets caught cheating. So usually, like, for example, if somebody let's say, for example, you have a politician who promotes a lot of anti-gay policies, and then they get caught sleeping with another man, then people will drag them, right? Publicly drag them. I don't actually have beef with it. And then we're going to talk about canceling, right? I don't actually have beef with it because from what I've seen that most people that get dragged usually kind of deserve it. Every now and then I see somebody get dragged for something that's minute. But usually, I don't have a problem with it. I kind of feel like, I don't know. I'm the type of person, and I haven't been dragged yet. And I think everybody's going to get dragged on Twitter eventually. I haven't been dragged yet, so I shouldn't really speak on it like that. But I kind of feel like most of the time, the people that I see get dragged, they usually deserve it. And they usually do something that's egregious to not just not just one marginalized group, but several marginalized people. I think and we're going to talk about Chrisette Michele, like what happened to her and how her career got canceled. Because I think that cancel culture doesn't actually really happen most of the time. And I'm going to talk about that in a second, in another segment. But anyway, like, people get dragged. And again, I kind of feel like when people get dragged, they deserve it. And usually, I'm not going to lie, some people that do the dragging are really good at it. I can give you some Twitter accounts that are really good at dragging people, where they really explain very well how they drag people. And they usually thread that. Then you have some people who drag and they're very insulting. And I think that's where I might have an issue with it. Like, I think there's a way to drag somebody without like being insulting, without threatening, et cetera, et cetera. Because I think a lot of times what happens is people threaten you and stuff. I think that's going overboard. At the same time, you have people who are very creative with the dragging, right? They create memes. They're real funny about it. They might even do a skit or two. So there's like people that are creative at it. But that's what I'm going to say. The first thing I'm going to say about dragging. Okay, so really with dragging culture, again, like I said, I really don't have an issue with it unless you cross the boundaries of threatening people and everything like that. And I don't have an actual problem with the draggers. But what I've never seen happen before with people that get dragged, I've never seen this happen. We're going to talk about cancel culture in a second. But what I never see happen is that the person never really fixes it. Like, the person that's being dragged, like, they never really fix it. Like, they might apologize, which, and I do restorative justice. Like, apology is like the second thing you do. That's like not really should be the first. The first thing should be acknowledging what you did, like acknowledging and understanding what you did. Because a lot of times we'll do something, right, and don't really peep because of our privilege, right? Usually it's because of our privilege or our entitlement or our ego, right? And we'll do something to somebody, they'll get upset, and then we're like, oh shit, my bad, I offended you. But we don't actually really acknowledge what we do and understand what we do. We might say, I'm sorry if I offended you. But the thing is, it's not it's not if you offended, you actually offended them, right? So I always see people that get dragged, they usually don't come back, right? And now somebody will say, well, people that get dragged, the draggers don't want to hear it. And you know what? You might be right, because there are people that'll drag you and then they'll cancel you, right? But most people because everybody doesn't do the dragging, right? People just watch, eat popcorn and watch, right? But most people don't do the dragging, but they want to hear what you got to say. They really sincerely do. And some people, even those that drag, will listen, but it got to be genuine. And again, I've never seen somebody who gets dragged come back and really, A, acknowledge and understand, B, provide a sincere apology, right? And here's an example. Like, when I see two students fighting or arguing, I stop them and I intervene and I mediate. But I always say to them, I want you to apologize, but I don't want you to apologize right now, because I know that if you apologize, you don't really mean it. And I know, me speaking from personal experience, if you don't mean your apology, I really don't want to hear it. And I'm not trying to be like an asshole. I just feel like that at the moment is not genuine, because you still think you're right. So I'd rather the students go figure out what, sit down and understand. Maybe talk to me later on, or to the other person or someone else, and they really figure it out. Like, yo, okay, why was this wrong? And then really understand, why was it wrong towards this person? Why did I do it? And then understand, and then you can really come back and apologize, and you say the right things. But I know a lot of times with celebrities and politicians, they have lawyers and public relations folks that kind of like coach you on that. That's why if you listen to a lot of apologies, they all kind of like sound the same. They're worded different, but they all come off the same. I'm sorry, but I'm not really sorry, in a nutshell, right? But on top of that, then you have to do what I usually tell students, you got to do what's called action steps, right? So, okay, I acknowledge, I understand, I apologize, but then now I really got to demonstrate that I really, A, learned my lesson, and B, I'm going to do what I need to do to fix it, right? So a lot of celebrities and politicians will say, well, I'm going to donate money to this cause, which, I always tell people, don't ever not accept money. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't be like, oh, I don't want to take the money and do something good with it. True indeed. But a lot of times what they'll do is they'll donate that money and then they'll keep it moving. And it's kind of like glosses over that. And then actually what it really does is it really makes the offender, it makes them sleep better. You know what I mean? That's really what that does. And that's not how really restorative justice works. Everybody needs to go to sleep better, right? So, again, I never seen them do any action steps that say, hey, take classes on social justice, take classes on those things, learn about it, talk to the people that actually do the work and find out what they need to do, really support them, amplify the voices of the people that you've marginalized. Like, there's so many things you can do to really, 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 really demonstrate that you actually learn your lesson. But I never see that happen. Now I'm going to talk about canceling, right? And canceling is just pretty much you stop supporting that person, whether it's monetarily, listening to their music, reading their articles, buying their stuff, just consuming the work they might put out. Let me say this about canceling culture, and shout out to Rodimus Prime of the Black Guy Who Tips, because he talks about this extensively on his podcast a lot. Canceling culture really doesn't work. There are a few exceptions to the rule, right? There are a few exceptions to the rule, but most of the time it doesn't work. Why? Because usually whoever does it is somebody that's usually very powerful, has a lot of connections, and has a deep social network, right? Like here's an example, like Roseanne Barr. Like, okay, true indeed, she got in trouble for tweeting what she said, even though she's been saying racist shit forever, right? And then like she loses her show, but she gonna come back. She's gonna come back. You know what I mean? And it's like, because she's a white woman and she just has those connections, right? This happens all the time. People get canceled and they come back. Now, don't get me wrong. They might not have the same level of success that they had previously, right? But they'll come back. I remember there was a preacher. I can't remember his name, man. Oh my God. Like somebody, the late great James, is it James Chandler? I gotta look this up. I'm horrible with names. There used to be this guy who used to walk around and he was a former magician and he used to go around. There's a dope documentary of him on Netflix. I'm going to put it in the show notes. Anyway, I used to want to be like this guy because he used to walk around and he used to call out preachers and he used to show how all the miracle shit they was doing was bullshit. And he went to this one big televangelist and he proved that this guy was a fraud, right? This was back in like the 80s. He busted him, you know what I mean? And then now in the 21st century, this guy's back on TV. So it's like canceling culture doesn't work all the time. I'm going to say most of the time it doesn't work. Actually, there are exceptions to the rule. Now, earlier I mentioned Chrisette Michele. Here's somebody who supported Trump and she is struggling for her career. Like she lost literally everything, right? Everybody started canceling shows on her. Her fan base was like, we're done. She got dropped from her label. It was just so many things happened to her. And I think a lot of it is because, of course, she's a black woman. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. What she did was kind of fucking whack, but she's a black woman. So that's pretty much really low on the white supremacist hierarchy, white supremacist capitalist patriarchy hierarchy, right? But I think what it is that, and you know what? No, I'm not even going to say that what I think what it is because Kanye is doing the same thing and he might have lost a substantial amount of his fan base, right? But there are still people that are picking up his albums and the albums that he is producing. So his brand might hurt a little, but and what I mean by his brand got hurt a little, I mean like he got hurt. Just he's not going to be making as much money as he did before, but he's not going to be hurting in any sense, right? Like he has generational wealth, right? At this point. So canceling culture doesn't always work. People always come back. Again, most people who come back, they're not going to be as successful as they were before, right? And the thing about us is that a lot of us have a short attention spans. A lot of us forget really quickly, and a lot of us forgive. A lot of us, and I blame a lot of that on Judeo-Christian principles. A lot of us forgive very, very, very quickly, too quickly, if you ask me. And I think that's why when people say, "Oh, cancel culture is hurting nobody," I'd be like, "Nah, actually, cancel culture doesn't really work 99% of the time, unless you're a black woman, right?" So there you go, ladies, party people. So here I am at the longest table. We're actually holding it here in Dayton at Ponence High School, which is I love this place because it's like they teach like trades here. But anyway, I think the longest table is dope, and it's funny because when I talk to people about it from outside my area, we've been doing it for a while. They're like, "Wow, that's great." So what happens is people from the community put together a big luncheon, and they put all these tables together to make it like really long. And they ask people from all over the city to come around together and meet and just talk. So they mix you up with the crowd and you get to meet people from different neighborhoods. And I think it's pretty dope. I think I crashed one last year, but I know people that organize this. So it's kind of like in the same vein of what I really try to discuss. Community is important, knowing where your community is, knowing where all the spots is at, knowing the businesses, the history. And I think it's lovely. It's just a dope collab, man. I love it, man. I'm not going to crash these anymore. I'm going to just start showing up. Word.
Yeah. I think Prince should run first on this one. I think Prince should run first on this one.
Definitely want to talk about, I was on a couple of shows. Matter of fact, I'm a regular on the Fly Guys podcast by my man Sekou Varner. And you can add him on Twitter at Grandpa Crunk. And yes, I said Grandpa Crunk. You can add him over there. But his stuff is on YouTube. The Fly Guys podcast is also on Stitcher. And it is also on Apple Podcasts, so definitely check that out. And then I was on a show for the Father's Day special of You Had Me at Black, which is actually a pretty dope podcast. Man, you guys will love it. They tell stories, some really dope stories. The editing is amazing. But shout out to the people that You Had Me at Black. I'll put that information in the show notes so that you guys know. But if you follow the Fly Guys podcast, I'm on there. And then also You Had Me at Black. Word. want to talk about immigration for a minute. And it's just, there's a lot of things that people say that really bother me. And just let y'all know that, like many Americans, and we're going to talk about that too. I am the children of immigrants. My mom and my dad immigrated here from Dominican Republic, as did a lot of my friends. A lot of my friends, like I was talking about earlier, we talked about Luke Cage. A lot of my friends came from the West Indies. A lot of my people came from Central America. A lot of people. I have a lot of friends that come from West Africa. I have students that they're refugees from conflicts all over the world, right? So it's kind of like immigration is something that's very close to home. So when I see people debating about it, they say a lot of things that are damaging, that are, racist, that are stereotypical, that make false assumptions, right? Here's one assumption that I want to tackle directly. A lot of times we believe that all immigrants are Mexican. That is very far from the truth. Very, very, very far from the truth. Immigrants come from all over the world. And, not just Central America and South America, but also Africa, Asia, and even Europe. Matter of fact, there's a lot of immigrants that come from Ireland. We can get into that later, but there's a misconception that usually they're, Latino. And no, they're different races and ethnicities that immigrate to the United States. So we have to be really careful when we make those assumptions. I know that there's always been, in the United States, there's always been this racism towards immigrants from Mexico. If you look back to all the political cartoons, they've always depicted Mexicans as being, pretty much monsters. And that's something that comes and is rooted in white supremacy. So that's something that we have to address too. But a lot of times I hear people say, particularly people in black communities, they might say things like, well, Mexicans are anti-black, or this immigrant group is anti-black. And while that may be true, that still doesn't mean that justice shouldn't be served. Still doesn't mean that people who are that are immigrants from other countries should be treated a particular way, right? And I'm not saying that all black folks are like that, because the black folks I surround myself with, they don't get down like that. But I see that happen in other spaces on and off the internet. So I just think that that's something that should be addressed. Another thing that should be addressed is there's this idea that everybody that came to the United States was an immigrant. That is incorrect. Let me let this plane pass over. I apologize for that. That's something that is very incorrect. Number one, Europeans came in here as invaders, right? They never actually applied for citizenship. And I'm talking about the settlers that came here before it became the United States. And later on, many of them came and they were, they forced themselves onto, different areas of the country and moved, particularly Native Americans. Native Americans are not immigrants. They were born here way before, whites came. People of African descent were dragged here as slaves. So to say that they were quote unquote forced immigrants, I think that really takes away from the suffering of the Ma'afa. We're going to talk about the Ma'afa some other time and what that means. It's spelled M-A'-AFA. So let's not do that. Let's not discount all that suffering. And actually, because when we say forced immigration, it kind of actually says that white folks were benevolent in their enslavement of our ancestors. That's bullshit. They enslaved our people and brought them here against their will. And that's something that needs to definitely be pointed out, right? So this narrative that everybody here is an immigrant, a lot of it is bullshit. We should, again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have an open immigration policy. I believe that we should. It's just that when we talk about immigration, if we're pro-immigration, we need to be careful on the verb and the words that we use, right? So that's my thing. That's what I want to educate folks on. I could go on and on about it. Again, it's near and dear to my heart. It's something that I fight for. But this is not the first time that presidential administration has attempted to close borders on immigrants coming from different countries. They did it to the Chinese. Remember that we've during World War II, we had a Japanese internment camp. So let's not even talk about the prison industrial complex. I could go on and on about the different things throughout our history in the United States that's been done. That's kind of, repeats itself, right? And it was Santayana that said history repeats itself, right? Well, I believe that history is in rhyme form, right? It goes literally in rhyme form. So we need to be careful when we have these discussions about immigration. These are marginalized people, and some of them are people that you know. So you have to be real careful with how we word it. Word. Yeah, party people. So in this health segment, we're going to talk about being out on the beach and being out and about. Now, I think, this is dope because this is the best time to actually be out because in most places in the United States, it's warm. So I recommend going hiking. If you're living near a beach, go to the beach and actually get in the water. Like, don't just sit there. Just actually get in the water. Swimming pools are dope. Get in the water, have fun, go out there, do your thing. Maybe do some yoga classes outside. Definitely. And let me just say this for a lot of y'all been working and getting that, quote unquote beach body. Again, everybody has a beach body, by the way. You're out there working hard. It's your chance to show it off. So show it off. It's all love. At the same time, you can still get sunstroke. You can still get a sunburn, even if you're black, so even if you're brown. I think it's important that you protect yourself. Me personally, I know people trip when I say this, but carry an umbrella, even if it's not going to rain, because sometimes you might want to shade yourself. It's just a good idea. Shout out to the Nigerians who gave me that idea. But it's a good idea to do that. Good sunscreen. And I think you want the one that says the SPF is over 40. That's what you want. Put sunscreen on your kids or whatever. And you utilize shade properly. Also stay hydrated. Please stay hydrated. I think I've seen people get heat stroke more than I see people get sunstroke or sunburn. I've seen that happen a lot. I've seen a lot of people pass out. Stay away from sodas and, drinks that have high fructose corn syrup. Try to really focus on drinking a lot of water, period. I mean, that's something you should always do, really do that. So that's my word of advice for your health, for the health segment. Remember, just pay attention to where you're going. I know there's a lot of concerts and you're going to be standing. Some of us are going to be standing around for long periods of time, which you should kind of be used to, but not all of us are, right? Some of us work a job, we're sitting on a desk for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So that might not be something you're used to. That's why it's important that you do walking. You do go out and walk. It's very natural for you to walk. When we're not walking, it's actually not natural. So try to get your walk on. Just pay attention to your body because your body will actually tell you when there's a problem. Breathe, Get out and breathe. So I hope that helps out for this segment. I know we're covering a lot. It's outside, have fun. Word.
This is a man's world, but it would be nothing without. This is a man's world.
Part 3, QBC, sip lime Bacardi, heavy on the list, you blink my ice ring, John Lee Green, yeah that's small Part 3, QBC, sip lime Bacardi.
In this week's segment of How to Approach Women, I had a listener ask me a question, really good question. They say that when they approach someone, should they bring up the topic of sex? Now, that answer is kind of obvious. It's very, very obvious. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't have, and I'm not trying to say that this listener doesn't, but they just don't have the etiquette, what is taboo and what isn't. I kind of feel like you shouldn't come off the jump talking about sex, even if that is your intention. I know people are going to say, oh, you're being deceiving. I think here's my thing with that is that me personally, and I don't mind talking about sex with people, anybody pretty much, but I kind of feel like if I don't feel comfortable around you, I'm not going to talk about it. And that's with anybody, period. If I don't feel comfortable with somebody, I'm not going to talk about anything, but certain things. I might talk about, maybe a little bit of politics. I might talk about the weather. I might talk about a movie, but I won't talk about certain topics if I'm not comfortable with you. And I think that when you first meet someone, you don't have that, there's a boundary, and I don't think you have that right to talk about sex. Now, if she brings it up, different story. But other than that, and that's with anything, if they bring something up, I think it's open game. But if you're initiating contact, you might want to chill on that. And, maybe later on, when you find that, when they let you know it's cool, and they will, I think that's when you do that. Word. Here's the part of the show we do shout outs. First of all, shout out to the homie Steph from Dope Science Show. She actually put me on. I know I talked about it last week till You Had Me at Black, which I know it was going to be a dope show. I just didn't expect it to be that dope. It was really, really dope. So I definitely, again, another shout out to you. Shout out again to my man Sekou, who put me on the Fly Guys podcast and kind of strong-armed me into being a regular on there, which is cool. I like being a regular on there. It's dope. We just did a dope discussion on the Me Too movement. Also, shout out to my man Buscape, one of my capoeira students who just earned his PhD, man. That's a big deal, brother. He's an engineer too, so it's a big deal. He got a full-time gig and everything. So he said, I think he's single, ladies, but just shout out to y'all three. Peace. So there you have it, episode 18 of Where My Killer Tape At, counting it down. If you want to continue the conversation, you can do so on Twitter or on Instagram. And make sure you use the hashtag Where My Killer Tape At, killer spelled Killa. You could also check us out on Google Play, on Stitcher, on YouTube, where I put a lot of my old episodes. Again, Google Where My Killer Tape At. And of course on Apple Podcasts. If you want to hit me up on the Twitters, at Dan Trezomi, and that's DANTRESOMI, or you can hit me at Omi's Podcast, OMISPODCAST, podcast, right? And definitely check us out there. If you have any questions, hit me up in the DMs. I was definitely open for that. I love y'all. Hope y'all do well. I hope you're having a dope summer. And this is episode 18 of Where My Killer Tape At. Word.